Okay, moving on to 13.5, we're going to be rationalizing denominators. You can kind of think of this in a couple different ways. We might be reducing some fractions or doing some division, but this new technique of rationalizing the denominators is also going to come out here. So taking a look at this first one, we can think about, how many times does 6 divide into 18? That's one way to think about this. And we could say, well, it divides in there 3 times, and we can just get to the answer, radical 3. Okay? Now, another way to think about it, just so I can show you what's happening here, is that you could break the square root of 18 down into the square root of 3 times the square root of 6, and then you have the square root of 6 on the bottom. And you see those square root of 6s would cancel out there, leaving you the square root of 3. So a couple of different ways to think about it. Okay. Now looking at this one here, if you think about both of these are divisible by 7, so we could divide by 7 and we could have radical 11 over a radical 2. But in this section, they talk about rationalizing the denominator, and what that kind of means is that we can't end with a radical in the denominator. So a nice way to technique to get rid of that radical in the denominator is we can multiply by radical 2, and we can multiply by radical 2 here. And if you look, we're multiplying by a disguised version of 1. So our fraction isn't going to change value, but it's just going to change how it looks here. So on the top here, we get the square root of 22. And on the bottom, remember from our rule in the last section, square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. Okay. Looking at this next one, both of these are divisible by 7. And so we can reduce to the square root of 18 over the square root of 11. Okay. And again, we can't end with the radical in the denominator here, so we're going to take this times square root of 11, and we're going to take this times square root of 11. And again, a disguised version of 1. So one little technique here that makes this problem a bit easier is we might spot that the square root of 18 can simplify before we multiply this together. Otherwise, we might have a bigger number to try to simplify. So if we look here, 9 is going to divide into 18. So I can think about this top of the fraction, the numerator, is 3 radical 2 times radical 11 over, well, that's going to be 11. And then radical 2 times radical 11, we have 3 radical 22 over 11. One thing you want to be careful of is that if this could simplify, we would do that, but 3 11ths won't simplify. Okay. And then looking at D here, if we check this out, 6 will actually divide into 48 8 times, and the y's will cancel. So when we divide 6 into 48, we get the cube root of 8. Remember, the y's will cancel out, and then the cube root of 8 is 2. So that one works out pretty nice. All right, thanks.